Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. This is James coming at you from the quarantine studios here in East Atlanta, live for Foodwell Alliance. This is the Monday Morning Gardener Show. I'll be joined here in a couple of minutes by my esteemed colleague, Fred Conrad. Fred Conrad is going to come on, help us answer a few gardening questions that we've received from our audience in the last couple of weeks. We'll be talking about some wasps. We'll be talking about squash. We'll be talking about tomatoes. So I'm excited to chat with Fred here in a second and get some of these questions answered. Shout out to Nature's Candy Farms, who we're seeing already in the stream. Nature's Candy Farms has been doing garden installations. So if you're behind on your garden install, go ahead and hit up Nature's Candy Farms and then come tune in so we can answer your questions regarding gardening. Fred has now joined me here in the group, so I will get started answering some of these questions. So hey, what's up, Lily? We got Lily Antonicio in the building. Fred, we've got a beautiful circle where your head would usually be.
Okay.
But I can't hear you. That's the good thing.
Okay, good. What can I do?
That's a good question. I don't know. Maybe I'm going to kick you out, and then maybe you can try joining again, and maybe it'll work.
Okay.
I don't know. All right. All right. We've removed Fred from the chat. What's going on, Stephanie? Nice to see you. And I'm going to try to add Fred back, and hopefully his video will appear this time. But we have 3 questions that we've been sourcing from our friends and colleagues that we'll be answering. Hey, Fred, so honestly, the last time this happened, I just retroactively dropped in your face on the edited version. And, it looks weird. Oh, there you are. You're there. You're back. Okay, great. So this is Fred Conrad, everybody. If you haven't met Fred or haven't interacted with Fred, he's been building, maintaining, installing community gardens in and around the greater Metro Atlanta area for years. We're very fortunate to have him on our team, not only to keep us educated, but so that we can help all the new gardeners out there, especially this year. So, Fred, what you been up to the last few days?
Well, we had such a run of, aside from attending a Black Lives Matters rally, doing a lot of trying to keep up with all the weed pressure. We had so much rain for a while there.
All right, well, we've got 3 questions to answer today. The first one came to us from our friends at the fire station, I believe. They have been dealing with some wasps and have some wasp nests that they'd like to deal with safely. I know that you joked that this wasn't necessarily a problem you had solutions for, but I was wondering if we could talk about wasps in the garden in general and just the pros and cons and what you can do to sort of mitigate any damage they might do.
Well, so wasps don't do any damage in the garden. They're helpful in the garden because they eat a lot of caterpillars and aphids and things like that. They're hunters, they're carnivores. They do a great job with pest control. So you don't want to necessarily get rid of the wasps in the garden. You kind of want to encourage them, but you got to be able to work safely around them. In general, hornets are pretty aggressive. Yellow jackets and the white-faced hornets are both pretty aggressive. They respond to not only movement but vibrations, so pounding in stakes or pickaxing or cutting branches, anything, they can go off. So they are impossible to work with. But paper wasps aren't usually aggressive at all, and you can usually work around them and work in fairly close proximity to nests. The question we had from the grower was that there were paper wasps building underneath the ledges of the planter boxes, and asking if there was a safe way to relocate them. And really, you can't. They don't have the same kind of homing system that honeybees have. So if they're in like a bird feeder or a wooden frame or something, and you move it, they can't find it again to take care of the babies, the eggs, or whatever. So generally, if you try to move them, they don't survive being relocated. And if they're really in your way and you can't work around them, then you just kind of have. And there's no good organic way to do that. You just have to spray them or knock them down with water hoses or something like that, and get them
So
to
wasps,
move on to someplace.
while we may be afraid of them, don't want
But they
them
do
to
an
get too near
amazing
us,
job on
don't want to
aphid
get
control,
stung.
stuff like that.
Very beneficial for your garden.
Wasps
So
are just
be careful.
voracious eaters,
And,
and they
well, I
really
guess
do
you
a
could
great
say
job
be
on
careful
pest
what you wish
control.
for. You get rid of the wasp, you may be dealing with a lot more bugs in your garden in general. So something to keep in mind. All right, next question. Squash leaves starting to develop some white powdery substance on them. Do you know what's causing that, and what are some safe ways?
So normally, white spots on the foliage of squash leaves is powdery mildew is the disease, and that is just where warm air and high humidity intersect. And we have finally gotten there this year. We have finally gotten to the point where we're getting warm and muggy, and the nights are warm. I think the critical component there is that we're not cooling off as much in the evening. So powdery mildew, generally, the more sunlight you can get, if your squash are planted in the sunniest place you can provide them in the garden, that will help the most of anything you can do. If you're in part shade, you're more likely to get that, especially morning shade, because the dew will set on the foliage of those fuzzy squash leaves will be dewy. And if they're not getting morning sunshine, the dew will not evaporate off, and it will stay wet for a long period of time, and it will encourage the growth of mold. And there's not a lot you can do. Typically, it doesn't kill the plants. Okay. It would have to be a pretty bad infestation or a bad case of it, and that normally wouldn't happen this time of year. That would happen toward the end of the squash fruiting season anyway. So if it would end up to kill the plant, it usually is not till after the main harvest is done. So mostly, though, it's location, air circulation, sunshine, and not much else you can do. I would just throw in one other thing, though, that some squash plants and some other some zucchini and some other squash plants do have multicolored foliage with some shiny silvery patterns in them. So you do
Okay, all right, that makes a lot of sense. So double check, make sure that it is in fact
on the early
powdery
part
mildew
might
and
look
not a
funny
part
to
of
you,
the
but
leaf.
as the plant matures, you'll be able to tell.
But it sounds a
easily
bit
that
like
it's supposed
if
to
you're
be.
already experiencing this issue, you may have planted it in the wrong state. Yeah, right. Okay. So maybe a long-term lesson in that one. All right, moving on to our third question. And this is from someone who didn't realize that their tomato plant needed pruning, or at least to the degree, and has ended up with a verifiable bush. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about pruning tomatoes, and sort of what is the best strategy there.
Yeah. Okay. So tomatoes. The thing is with tomatoes, if you ask 3 different people the best way to do this, you're going to get 3 different answers. So there is no exactly right answer for this. Pruning, pinching tomatoes is optional. You don't have to do it at all. So, and tomatoes are fascinating plants. You know, it's a vine that we grow as a bush because we cage it and try to trellis it up off the ground so it doesn't root in and become unmanageable. But tomato plants also are interesting in that they have the capacity to break roots along the stem. So if you plant them deep or lay part of the plant down when you plant it and turn the top up, you'll get more roots and a healthy, more vigorous plant. But on the pinching and pruning thing, so the first step in the pruning, pinching process with tomatoes is that you have to know what variety you have. You have to know what variety, because there are 2 kinds of tomatoes, basically. There are ones they call determinate varieties, and there are indeterminate varieties. So you almost had to have saved the tag and be able to look this up to make sure. The tag itself might tell you the label that was on it when you bought it may tell you. But a determinate variety of tomatoes are mostly fall into the canning tomato group, the Romas, the category of plants where you want to get the whole harvest at one time in a short window of time, so that you have a whole lot of tomatoes to work with all at once, so that you can can them, make sauces, dry them, do a lot with them. And then they usually have a 2-3 week, usually peak harvest, and then they really are kind of done. Those kinds should not be pruned. If you have a determinate tomato, don't mess with it. Just let it grow like a big shaggy bush and keep it trained up off the ground. Do what you can, create a barrier between the soil and the foliage. You can prune off some of the lower leaves to help soil-borne funguses from getting a foothold in the foliage. But generally, the determinate varieties, you just want to leave them alone. The indeterminate varieties, however, as they begin to grow, you will see at the base of some leaves on the stem a whole new shoot coming up, a very straight, sturdy little shoot, a new branch, a new cane coming up there. And if those are allowed to grow, you end up with very thick foliage and lower down foliage, and it becomes hard to stake and manage the plant. So there are a lot of people that would go through early in the growing season, actually exactly now, this time of year, when the plants are still mostly putting on foliar growth, they're growing very vigorously, and go through and just pinch out at the base of that leaf, usually just above where it joins the stem. There'll be this other shoot coming out at about a 45-degree angle. Just pinch that off entirely with your fingers. Just pinch it off. You could cut it off with a pair of clippers. Be very careful you don't inadvertently nick the main stem. But pruning those out now will reduce the amount of foliage low down in the plant. They'll help air circulation. It'll allow sunlight to get to the inside of the plant and help tomato fruit ripen faster. It'll make it easier for you to find diseases and pests because you'll be able to see into the plant better. So there are a large group of people that do go through early in the growing season and pinch out those sprouts that are coming off this time of year. Later on, you can pinch the tips off the top of the plant to keep the size down, to control the height of the plant. That will allow you to handle the plant more easily.
If you have any gardening questions, feel free to just send us a direct message. You can also find a place to submit your questions on our website, foodwellalliance.org, or you can send an email to gardens@foodwellalliance.org